breaking news, a school shooting with reports of multiple fatalities.
He had ran up to me and yelled at me to give me my purse.
A warning for online shoppers tonight. A new scam that could steal your personal information in just a matter of seconds.
Breaking news, a deadly carjacking in Woodland Hills.
Tonight, police in Lancaster, Texas have identified a possible suspect who investigators say pointed a gun at a passing car.
The Situational Security Podcast today is brought to you in part by Liberty One Tech. Visit them at libertyonetech.com and save 15% on the Talk Text Plus when you mention Heart of America. Check it out. Heartofamerica.net is the place to subscribe to all the podcasts, whether it be, Situational Security, the regular Michael Hart Show, and then there's that, and then, of course, Unknown America. Today we are joined by a fellow we hadn't talked to in 4 or 5 years. His name is Kevin Reeve. Kevin's the founder and director of OnPoint Tactical Tracking School. With all the craziness going on in the world around us, and, of course, we are, looking at tornado season in the Deep South, hurricane season, and we're rolling back around. We've got the fires out in California. So many things that I think sometimes we take our safety and security for granted. Now, a lot of what the guys at OnPoint Tactical, led by Kevin Reeve, focus on is survival training as it relates to the outdoors. But they also have a variety of courses that are also specific to urban survival, urban evacuation, ways that we can make absolutely certain that we're prepped, and not necessarily in times of complete unadulterated anarchy, but just in the case of these storm events, these events that maybe we might see some unrest in the future. Who knows? And as we continue to build out on the situational security platform, we want to arm you, no pun intended, with as many of the tools as we possibly can to keep you safe in the event of any kind of crisis, whether it be urban or not. Kevin Reeve of OnPoint Tactical provided training to law enforcement, SAR teams, the U.S. military, and the arts of tracking, survival, escape, and evasion, as well as urban operations. Prior to founding OnPoint Tactical, Kevin worked one of the top tracking schools in America, spent 8 years as a director at this program, and was responsible for the instructor staff there. Kevin also worked at Apple Computer for 5 years, doing organizational development and coaching. He has trained SEAL team members from teams 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, as well as Special Forces members from the 3rd, 5th, 7th, and 10th groups, members of the Combat Applications Group, members of the 82nd and 101st Airborne Divisions, members of the Marine Force, Recon, the 75th Ranger Regiment, and on and on and on. It would take the entire program to read the resume of Kevin Reeve, and we welcome him into this edition of the Situational Security Program right here on the Heart of America Talk Radio Network. Good morning, Kevin. Can you hear me?
Yeah, doing well. Thank you.
Well, thanks for joining us. We appreciate it. It's been a while since you and I have spoken. Kevin, you guys, you do so much. I mean, the scope of your training, your classes, and your offerings is so extensive. Rather than me share with the listeners, I'd like for you to tell us a little bit more about OnPoint Tactical, some of the things you guys focus on, and then I want to talk about some of the basic survival techniques and skills that you feel like people need to know.
Okay. Well, we have our specialty in urban training. Our flagship class is called Urban Escape and Evasion, which teaches you how to deal with what we would call a high-threat environment. It's really designed for any situation where you might have a societal breakdown, you might have a loss of civility or a failure of civility, and it's designed to help you stay safe. It's designed to keep you from being victimized. So that's our flagship class. We also teach a class called Urban Evacuation, which is about how to get out, how to bug out, essentially. We teach you how to shelter in place in an urban setting. We teach Wilderness Scout Training, which is designed to give you the skills necessary to protect your community, learning how to patrol and do reconnaissance and so forth. We also teach off-grid medical classes, which are designed to teach people how to deal with medical emergencies when there is no higher care, when the hospitals are non-functional or full or just not available for whatever reason. So,
Kevin,
we have.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to say. So we have a pretty broad spectrum of skills. It's an interesting school.
Over the years, I have dealt with issues, and I don't want to use the word prepper because I think that's a little bit infantile at times. But there's a lot of debates and discussions. Here in the Deep South, we are right in Tornado Alley. I know there's been the California wildfires and so many things, these events that pop up in our lives. And I think sometimes when we talk about being prepared or urban survival, that it kind of creates the illusion that we're expecting a rogue band of Chinese to come over the ridge or the Russians are going to start nuking us. But the reality of it is that there are a lot of events that we go throughout the course of our lives that most people are just woefully ill prepared for. And I'm often stunned by that and the fact that people don't seem to take this particular issue or this topic seriously. Things as simple as, knowing how to start a fire or where to get foodstuffs or how to create shelter, because until you have these tragic events of a horrific tornado, we had one here almost 7-8 years ago, took out over 250 people and leveled half the state of Alabama. And this place was absolutely chaotic for days, if not weeks. And so I'm curious as to how ill prepared do you find the average? I know you do a lot of work with military, a lot of work with law enforcement, and these are people that obviously have these concerns already on their mind. But when you do classes, just like general public classes, how ill prepared are people for most of these events, do you think?
Well, it's interesting. I would say 95% are ill prepared, and when I teach classes, I have students who are there because they feel the need to be prepared, and they've taken some steps to do that. So the students themselves are what we're looking for. I mean, that's the 5% that are thinking about this kind of stuff. But most people are really much more concerned with who wins this week's edition of Dancing with the Stars, and than they are with where their next 3 meals are going to come from.
I couldn't agree more with that. I made a similar comment to that just yesterday. So let me. I realize you get into some really advanced stuff, but just at the most basic, rudimentary level, I have just walked in. I've got absolutely no survival skills whatsoever. I can be in an urban environment or a suburban environment or whatever the case may be. And I don't know if this is going to be post-apocalyptic storm or whatever the case may be. But starting from the ground up, what are some of the basic skills, techniques, and training that you feel like most or every American needs to have?
Well, we really try and start off with mental preparation. We do what's called stress inoculation, because the reality is that when you get yourself into a situation, an event occurs, and the event is, we'll just call it the event. The event is irrelevant. It could be an earthquake, could be tornado, could be economic collapse. We don't know what the event is. It doesn't matter. But it's going to create stress. And so the first and most important thing to keep you functional is learning how to manage your stress. So we talk about stress inoculation, how to prepare yourself mentally and emotionally for the stress. And that is our starting point. Once we get people to the point where they can deal with the stress, we talk about priorities. Okay, a situation has occurred. What are your priorities? And generally speaking, they're the same. Your first and most important priority is to secure yourself, immediate security. So if someone's shooting at you, get behind cover. If someone's chasing you, run. The building's on fire, get out. Whatever it takes to secure your safety is your first priority. Then we deal with medical attention. You know, you have to do a medical self-check and see if you're okay, and then treat yourself if you're not. Then your third priority is always going to be to figure out how to protect yourself. Sometimes, you know, I live in a place where I can carry a firearm everywhere I go. And so that's my protection. But I also have knives and carry knowledge to improvise weapons. So whatever it is you need to do to protect yourself, that is your third priority. Your fourth priority is to attend to your physical needs of shelter, water, warmth, and food. And that's so when people come in, most people don't have any idea how to make a shelter. And so we have to start with some of the very basic stuff of, let's build a shelter here. Let's take this piece of tarp and turn it into a tent. Then how do we find and purify water? How do we stay warm? How do we find food? So that's your next priority. Then we establish communications as our fifth priority, and our sixth would be, if you're away from home, to figure out how you're going to get home. So if you have a set of priorities, you don't have to think. That alleviates a lot of stress.
All right.
If the event occurs, you go, hey, am I secure? Am I safe? Am I hurt? Can I protect myself? And so if you have priorities, that makes the whole process a lot easier.
You know, this has been some years ago, and it's one of the things that you said to me last time we spoke that really, really stuck with me. And I mean, literally, this is 6, 7, 8 years ago, Kevin, and we were talking about urban survival and these type of events. And again, as you point out, the event is almost irrelevant, but you were talking about having groups within your neighborhood where you knew what the neighbors' capabilities were. And what I meant by that, or I think you meant by that, was in the event that there is some kind of disaster, whether it's a breakdown of society or just a bad storm, whatever the case may be, that, you know, people that are around you physically, you know, they all have their own individual specialties. Maybe somebody's a doctor. Maybe this guy over here is an accomplished Boy Scout. Maybe this guy over here is a hoarder of, green beans, or has a great garden, or whatever the case may be. And in some of these events that may very be a breakdown of society, that you almost become these like micro tribes of like-minded people that are all kind of coalescing to survive simultaneously.
Right. We have two slogans or two mottos for the school. The first is training trumps gear, which means that it is more important that you're trained than that you're equipped. You can improvise the equipment. And the second is that community trumps training. Community is the most important aspect of survival, in my opinion. We have this concept that from I don't know, probably like the Rambo movies, that the one man against the world is going to work. In reality, it just doesn't. You have to have a community. And it really behooves you to form relationships with your neighbors and understand who they are and what they do before the event occurs, so that you can tap into those resources, because those resources are abundant. There's going to be a beekeeper somewhere in my community. There's going to be somebody who knows how to take care of animals. There's going to be somebody who understands the water system. There's going to be, so I'm going to find and take advantage. I can't do all that. It's impossible for me to be a jack of all trades. I can try. I can get trained in as much as I can, but I recognize that as much medical training as I have, if you handed me a scalpel and say, let's do an appendectomy, I'd have a hard time. But there's a doctor down the road who would have no trouble with that. And so we have to find the resources in our community that we can utilize to stay together and coalesce as a community.
So how do we, that sounds great on the surface, but how do we go about doing that? I mean, do we create community watch groups or, because I know it sounds, people hear this kind of stuff and they think, well, that all sounds, fine and well, but then putting it in practice, because, it's so funny, it sounds so trivial, but many years ago, and it was about the same time you and I spoke the last time, we'd had a real bad storm in the area and everybody lost their power for several days. It was my house that everybody came to because they knew I had all of my cooking gear from back in the days when I was a Boy Scout leader. And so, these people knew me personally because they were right there in the same area with me. But obviously this is a very rudimentary example. I'm not going to say that, there needs to be one guy in the neighborhood that knows how to make coffee, but in this case, that was the case. But, just how do we go about implementing that and discovering these skills and even perhaps, helping people see, because, Kevin, I don't mean to go all weird or culturally or political on you, but we're living in some rather odd times, and it does feel like there are more threats. I know crime is up in some areas, and there seems to be some more desperation in the world, and despite the fact that the economy's doing well and unemployment's down, there just seems to be kind of this general sense that something, at least from my perspective, that something is looming in the horizon or over the horizon, and we had better be prepared for it. Most likely it's going to be a technological breakdown of some sort. An ATM satellite goes out and the world goes to hell in a handbasket because we can't use our debit cards. Our culture, I think, is so fragile because of technology. It's going to be something like that. So how do we coalesce these groups of like-mindedness?
Well, I think you're right in that everybody I talk to on both sides of the political spectrum feel a great deal of nervousness about where we're at, just because there's no telling what the event will be. And I agree. We're a very complex society, and it won't take it'll take a small disturbance in one corner to disrupt the entire thing. And so how do you create community is by extending yourself. You have to go out. We have organized a community organization as starting off as a watch group, and as a result of that, we've gotten to know our neighbors and talk to our neighbors, and as we discuss politics or whatever, this unease comes up, and we talk about, well, what would we do if A, B, or C happened? And and I get asked all the time, what's the worst case scenario? What's the worst thing you can imagine? And there's I can go pretty deep and dark there, but all of those events will generally require us to gather together to cooperate, and you do it by establishing relationships now. If you wait until the event, it's going to be too late. People are going to be too distrustful. But if you do it now, if you get out and extend yourself, then you get to know people. They get to know you. They get comfortable. Everybody knows that I'm the guy that you'll come to when things break down in the area because of my background.
Right.
I'm that guy in the neighborhood. But I have extended my connections in the community to as many people as I can to try and understand who, like I said, I have a doctor down the road, I have a vet, I have a police officer, I have a bunch of contractors. So I have a community here around me of people that I know with skill sets that I know. And that's the first phase.
Well, there's even a couple of websites out there. We have one, I don't know where you are, but, we have a website it's actually California-based, so it's probably across the country, but it's called nextdoor.com, and it allows individual neighbors to post missing dogs and, does anybody know where I can get cheap sugar or whatever the case may be? And that may very well be a place for people to start as well, because, something else I think we forget is that you might have all the training and all the foodstuffs and everything else, but if the people around you are ill prepared, your very own neighbors are ill prepared in the event of a disaster, as you point out, they're going to come looking for Kevin Reeve. But there are certain situations where, you might have a majority of the food, you've stockpiled this, and then there's people out there that are ill-prepared, and people will get quite desperate in scary and desperate times. And sometimes, your very own neighbors can be, a threat to your own survival if they're not prepared.
And we have a saying in the community that we are 9 meals away from anarchy, which says that after people have gone hungry for 3 days, then they'll do bad things. If your child is starving and your neighbor has food, what are you going to do? Well, my approach to this is to stockpile as much as I can so that I can feed as many people as I can. I want those people to be my allies, not my enemies. I don't want them to come after me for my food. I want them to come to me to get fed. And then I need them to take this rifle and go out there and stand watch for the night and so forth. And so I think you start by extending yourself now, but when the time comes, you have to be able to, I can't feed everybody, right? And that I hope there are enough other people around who have some level of preparation that can pick up some of that slack as well.
In looking at across the websites and some of the things that you do, one of the courses that you guys deal with is urban evacuation. And, you make comments about getting out of the city centers, that, these are not going to be, because, you're going to get, even from my perspective, from what I understand, even more desperation, because you have this higher configuration, if you will, or density of population. And so if we are in an urban setting, maybe we own a loft in town or whatever the case may be, and the grid goes down, or there's some kind of, mass hysteria event going on. And I really do believe something of that nature is coming, because although there's a lot of very positive signs in this country, I do feel like with a lot of the growing trends and the hashtag movements and everybody being suspicious of everybody else, regardless of what the economy's doing, there's a lot of folks out there, Kevin, just seem pissed off and scared at the world. And so a lot of these things, these flashpoints, are going to, in my opinion doesn't matter for much, most likely occur in the city centers. So in that situation, is it best for us to remove ourselves from the situation?
Well, it depends on where you are and what if you live in the city center, you probably want to hole up for a few days, and you need to have food and water to do that. And you hopefully have some method of protecting yourself. But if there is an opportunity, if you're at work and you live in the suburbs, but you're working downtown, you got to get back home. And so, the Urban Escape and Evasion class, that's what that class teaches you, is how to get out of a dangerous environment, how to remove yourself. And it's a complex set of skills, but it involves things like being able to pick locks, being able to start a car, defeat the ignition on the car. And it involves escaping from unlawful custody if somebody has grabbed you and is holding you, and it involves improvised weaponry, and it's a whole scope of skills that will help you get from urban to suburban or urban to rural. And that is your objective, is because you have a large number of people competing for very limited resources in an urban environment, and that's what makes it dangerous. There's a lot of people and not a lot of stuff.
No, you're exactly right. And recently I read a book called Tribe, which pretty much details some of the more tribal cultures out there and how they respond to these situations. But I want to take this for a moment.
One of my favorite books of the last 5 years, I got to say.
Did you read it as well?
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And it makes some great points. And I've had people make the comment to me, well, it's really just promoting socialism. But no, you got to read what the book is actually saying to you, that we really are all in this together. And in societies where you have a weak link, so to speak, those people are run off pretty quick. And so it's anything but that. It's a fascinating read. It truly is. And I kind of I really wanted to kind of get into that today just a little bit to let people see that, your greatest resources outside of your own training and skills, as you point out, is in fact community and understanding these things, because it is going to be the communities that are going to be pockets of resistance, or pockets of survival is the best way to put it, I guess. But, highly recommend the book.
We go through when a society breaks down, we go through phases. And the first phase is generally cooperation, where people get along, they try and help out. If there's an earthquake and buildings are collapsed, people are out there digging into the rubble, trying to save people's lives. That cooperation phase goes on for a while. But if no relief comes, then we go into more of what we would call a self-preservation phase, where I have to look out for myself. I can't just take, and so we kind of pull in a little bit. And then if no help comes, we go into anarchy. That's why I say we're 9 meals away from anarchy. This means that everybody realizes no help's coming, and they go out gathering resources on their own. So it's looting and robbing and home invasion and everything else that you can imagine for a period of time. And then after that period of time, after a while, people start to realize there's economy of scale, and they form into tribes. And the tribes tend to be, in most breakdowns, they're based on social class or ethnicity. And once the tribes form, then, actually things start to restore, order is restored a little bit once tribalism comes into place, because the tribes are keeping things peaceful. And then if nothing happens so at some point, some resourceful, charismatic leader will become a warlord and unify all the tribes. And that's when things actually stabilize quite a bit, except that the individual has no liberty. He's now under the direction. This is, if you look at Mogadishu, if you look at Haiti, if you look at Venezuela today, you're seeing all of these things happening. You're seeing the whole spectrum. And, we have gone, Venezuela is now in a tribal mode. And
no, that's actually a great example.
Oh yeah, it has been a very slow descent into anarchy and then tribalism, but it has been very clearly demarked. You can see how it happened and when and how, and it is a good example of what could happen here. I happen to think here it will happen faster, but maybe not. Maybe it'll be a nice slow descent like theirs is.
Well, it's interesting
a good case.
It's interesting that you bring that up, because, just a few years ago, Venezuela, it's a fantastic example. Venezuela was a pretty vibrant economy. Of course, it was a fascist government, but it was a pretty vibrant, economy. And they have just kind of disintegrated, as you point out, into complete anarchy, where people are eating dogs in the street. It's the craziest thing. Right. And I think that if people think that kind of stuff cannot happen here, they are sorely mistaken. We're having a conversation with Kevin Reeve of OnPoint Tactical. The Michael Hart Show is brought to you in part by Liberty One Tech. Visit them at libertyoneTech.com and save 15% on Talk Text Plus when you mention Heart of America. Liberty One Tech, they have just done a wonderful job with me. They're a longtime friend of the program. Tolly, yes, when we say the Michael Hart Show is brought to you in part by Liberty One Tech, we mean literally, whether you're watching live or listening to the podcast a little bit later. Liberty One Tech is connecting the digital pipes of the internet together to make this broadcast possible. And believe me, Tolly can help you as well. In fact, he has a very special discount just for Heart of America listeners. The Talk Text Plus provides VIP access to expert technology help regularly, $20 a month, but Heart of America listeners can save 15% when you mention Heart of America. Again, that's Liberty, the number one tech, libertyonetech.com, and the Talk Text Plus VIP service. Save 15% when you mention heart of America. And we thank Talia Williams and Liberty One Tech for supporting the Michael Hart Show, and we thank you for supporting them. Also, as we have shared with you over the course of the last several days, currently The Unknown America is on sale, and you can pick up a copy of that just by going over to theunknownamerica.com. If you order it there, it'll also come out fully autographed, no shipping, and I'll even send you a free pocket constitution and a Declaration of Independence, just as my way of saying thank you. There have been many people that have ordered this book over the course of the last couple of months, and last night even a couple of new bookstores picked it up, the old brick and mortar bookstores. So somebody might be liking that thing out there. Jump on board and learn all about some of the history that you did not know about this country. And the next couple of weeks, we'll also be announcing the Unknown America for Kids edition, and then hopefully early spring, the board game edition. So go check that out right now, theunknownamerica.com. Pick up a copy of the book. We'll autograph it to you and get it right back to you. And now let's get back to our conversation with Kevin Reeve of OnPoint Tactical, as we can discuss how important it is for you to learn how to become your very own first responder. And kind of staying with the tribal viewpoint and a tribal or communal kind of a situation, which can be beneficial. It's almost like when you're talking about knowing who the doctors are, the mechanics, and the veterinarians are, we're kind of establishing up front the tribal framework of how our community will respond in the event of disaster. Am I just incorrect about that?
No, that is absolutely right. And in fact, I have done a lot of work in my own community to create that structure, that framework. And I've identified a bunch of areas that you need to think about. I'm trying to organize that now and in preparation for it. But, it's like, what kind of stuff do you need,
Right.
Well, you got to have, for your community, you need to think about security. How do you maintain law and order when the demands on law enforcement are exceeded?
Well, I think a lot of people... Go ahead. I'm sorry. I'm stepping all over you.
Oh, I was just going to give you a quick outline of the community organization.
Oh, please do.
Please do. Health. Security is my first priority. Second is health and well-being, medical needs, water, sanitation. I have to house people if their housing is not fixed. I have to have some way of feeding people. I need some way of maintaining energy, whether that be to keep the wells pumping or firewood gathering, whatever it is, I need to deal with energy, and then acquisition and trade. And so as I structure the organization, I'm trying to figure out how to meet the needs of all those things with the people I have. So I have contractors to help with housing. I have people here who garden like crazy, lots of gardeners. And those are the people who are going to help us with food production and so forth. So I'm going to deal with security. And so that everybody has something to contribute. We have to identify what that is, build a structure around it so that when the time comes, I can just say, hey, Doc, I need you to set up a medical tent over here. Here's supplies that I have. Here's supplies that others in the community have. Good luck. And we're already there.
I think that people really need to pay attention to what they're being told, because, you and I obviously are both advocates for carrying a weapon, and we're supporters of the Second Amendment, et cetera. And a big part of the reason that, at least me personally, is if I do find myself in a situation, and this is kind of a micro survival situation, a micro event, then maybe it's a mass shooter situation or whatever compared to a tornado or something worse. But we carry because we realize that we are our first line of defense, and that we are going to be there because we're already there much quicker than law enforcement. Even if they get there in 3 or 4 minutes, some of these mass shooting events are over in less than a minute and a half. And so law enforcement cannot be dependent upon, as great as they are, to be there in a timely fashion to rescue me from the imminent danger that I'm currently facing. But that also applies to fire and rescue and paramedic, personnel. People need to realize it transcends just carrying a gun. It's everything.
Right.
And we've got to be our first responder paramedic and our first responder police officer and our first responder doctor. And that's exactly what you're telling folks is because in these situations, minutes matter, seconds matter. And so we have got to be pre-prepared.
If you have an injury to your femoral artery and you call 911, you will be dead before you're off the phone. If you can't put a tourniquet on and stop the bleed, then there's, you've got to be able to take responsibility for your own security, for your own safety, for your own well-being. Nobody else can do it. It's not even their job. The police officers, their job is to maintain the peace. It isn't to protect me. It's to protect the peace. If it happens to overlap, that's great. But that's not their job. Their job is not to rush into my house if there's a home invasion and shoot everybody that's in a threat. That's my job. It's so interesting that you bring that up because we had that very conversation on a TV program that I was a guest on just last evening as it relates to Parkland, where one federal judge had made the point that, that resource officer did not have a responsibility to enter that school. As tragic as that behavior was, that constitutionally speaking, law enforcement, as you point out, unless somebody's in their custody, does not have a constitutional requirement to enter, as you point out, the burning building, despite the fact that we would disagree with that or feel heartbroken by it. You're absolutely correct. Most cops I know would do that because that's who they are. At their heart, that's they're protectors. But that's not their requirement, and it's not their job. And if you expect it, in an urban environment, good luck. As much as I respect law enforcement, let's look at LA County. Los Angeles County has 10 million people. Last count, there were 22,000 sworn police officers. Think about that ratio. 22,000 cops, 10 million people. And what makes it even scarier is that LA County has about 160 to 180,000 gang members. So, what can you really expect from the police in a situation where there's a mass event of some sort? Are they going to be able to, when you call 911, what are they going to tell you? Right. Well, good luck. Well, again, we see these situations where, we have this happen again in Alabama back in 2011, where we had an outbreak of somewhere in the neighborhood of 30, 40, and I'm not exaggerating, tornadoes simultaneously. There were some neighborhoods, and we saw this in California. There were some neighborhoods first responders didn't get to for days. Right. But I think part of the breakdown is that when people hear programs such as this, they think that we're talking about becoming like the Resistance in the Terminator movies. And, and that we're some clandestine rogue force with bandanas around our head that are fighting back against the oligarchy and tyranny of automation or something, when in all actuality, it can be something as simple as, a bad storm coming through your neighborhood or wiping out the power grid for 4 or 5 days. The conceptions that people have of me and my company based on what they don't know makes me laugh. It's really funny how people misperceive, what it means to be self-reliant. Well, self-reliant means you have a bunker in Idaho. Well, no, it doesn't. That's your thing. That's fine. I don't care. But that's not what it means. It means you have some basic skill to take care of yourself. You have the will to take care of yourself, and you have the tools to take care of yourself. It takes skill, will, and tools. If you want to be self-reliant, you got to have some ability. You got to get trained. You got to get some experience, but you also have to want to do it. Right. And I meet a lot of people who have the want, the desire. I hear all the time. I had a woman say, "Well, if you get between me and my cub, In other words, my child, I am a mama bear. And I say, okay, here's my friend. This guy is 6'3". He weighs 250 pounds. He's a retired Green Beret. He helps me teach classes. I said, you think you can do anything to this guy? You can't. You don't have the skill. You have the will. Nobody's questioning that, but you have to have the skill and you have to have the tools. So skill, will, and tools that's the foundation of our training. You can't do if you don't have any of the. If one of those is missing, you're not going to be successful.
Right.
And so,
Kevin, one of the things I'd like to do, we're getting kind of tight on time here, and I appreciate you being so generous with your time today. We want to give your website and stuff out as well. But one of the things that I wanted to do is, despite the fact that this broadcast, is archived, we're live right now, but despite the fact that we will archive this for about a year or so, it is around Christmas time, and we are seeing, when we're doing the thing live, we are seeing that there's some increases in crime around the country. But let me tell you very quickly, one of the reasons that we're doing this program, that we've been doing situational security stuff for, on Fridays for some time now. And we've had some great experiences in the time we've been doing this. But this was actually an offshoot of something that we did, a seminar that we did, a live seminar in Alabama some years ago, where, we were hoping to get 200 or 300 people to show up for a situational security summit. We had FBI people there. We had investigators from Columbine and first responders, and it was a great program. We hope to get 200 people in this room. We had 4,500 people show up, and so we know that there's a lot of desire for the information. But one of the things that we had covered at that time that I'm trying to reproduce, in addition to what we've talked about, and something I think that might be a concern for people right now today, particularly as we're out and about in the world, is we call this the Situational Security Program. We call that the Situational Security Summit. Can you give us some ideas just from a day-to-day practical application as we are out about in the world, some of the things that we might want to pay attention to in terms of threats, things that we might want to be situationally aware to just throughout the course of our days?
Sure. This is the most important thing we teach is awareness, and I am happy to talk about awareness. It is the basis of all survival, is to be aware. So awareness is simply the choice or the decision to stop becoming engaged with your phone and pay attention to what's going on around you. And I use phone as an example, but there's lots of ways people distract themselves. And if you want to stay safe in an urban environment, you have to keep focused on what's going on around you right now. You can't be thinking about about having to pay the electric bill tomorrow, and you can't be focused on the conversation you had with your boss yesterday. You have to be focused on who's around you. It's all based on a very simple principle, and that principle is called baseline. Baseline is what is happening and what the noise, activity, sound, movement levels are like when nothing is going on, when it's just regular baseline activity. You have to be able to monitor the baseline because predatory behavior creates a disturbance to that baseline. A predator, a fight, a shooter, anything like that, you'll notice a rise in the noise and the activity and the movement. And if you're paying attention to that, you get a big lead. You get a big advantage. It's much easier to prevent a crime than it is to react to it. So part of awareness is being aware of the people around you, where they are, what their body language is, what their spacing is, how they're, who they're looking at, what they're doing, who they're paying attention to. I would really love to do a complete show with you sometime on just situational awareness.
Oh, I'd love to.
It is my favorite topic. I love to talk about it. So once I know the baseline, I can start to monitor disturbances to the baseline. And that is it. That is the whole process. It's as simple as that. Now, I have very specific ways of monitoring the baseline, and it's probably more than we have time to go into today, but we can come back and address that. But I'm looking for movement patterns of people that are moving way above the baseline or way slower than the baseline. They're going against the flow. People that are bomb-shelling out from a specific location, all moving away and radially from a location. There's all kinds of movement patterns that tell me something is going on. And so I monitor those. I always try and maintain spatial orientation. In other words, I know where people are around me. It's pretty hard to sneak up on me. People do it sometimes, but it's pretty hard because my head is, I hate to say my head is on a swivel, but it is, and because that sounds corny, but I'm constantly paying attention to where I am in relationship to other people. And I'm very careful about letting people inside what we call the reactionary gap. In other words, if they're close enough to me that I can't prevent an attack, then they're too close. So spatial orientation is really important. I look for pre-event indicators. There are some things. Again, I just don't have time. But we'll have to come back and do this again, I hope.
Well, I mean, I'll be happy to do it the first of the year because, I'm fascinated by this kind of stuff, and it sounds very. I mean, it's kind of deep, and kind of give you an observation of my own because, we had an event here in Alabama where we have an officer-involved shooting, a white officer presumably, and a black young man that was shot, and he was not the shooter in this particular mall. There was some justification for it to the degree that we understand it. This case is still active, but there's a lot of unanswered questions. But the point is that this particular event, Kevin, has sparked a lot of protests in the area. And a lot of these protests, although they have been, for all intent and purposes, they have been peaceful, although loud. But, in a couple of instances, there's been 10, 15, 20 people show up at a mall to protest and quite loudly and leveling accusations towards law enforcement. But that protest, this is going to sound so weird. I mean, you'll understand it. But there was a sense to me that the protest going on over there kind of affected what people were doing over here. It was like there was a disturbance in the force. It was the darndest thing. No, we call that where the event is occurring. That change in the baseline radiates out in a circle. We call it a concentric ring, and those concentric rings of disturbance. If you're paying attention, you'll see what's happening, or you'll notice something is happening well ahead of everybody else because they're not monitoring baseline. And that change in baseline is the key to staying aware. So, let's plan on another show, and we'll go into awareness extensively. I would definitely like to do that because I think that, in this environment that we're in right now, with the country and it has nothing to do with politics. I mean, it's political stuff going on, but it just seems like, the advent of technology and people being able to, and I'm talking about social media technology, people espousing their viewpoints and opinions. Now everybody's offended or pissed off or whatever the case may be. There just seems to be an uneasiness and a lack of civility seems to be in. And I'm just so delighted that you make the point that, we are our own first responders. We have to be.
Right? Nobody else is going to be, the old saying, I repeat it often because it makes a lot of sense. It's when seconds count, the police are minutes away.
Right.
The police are not, and that's not even their job. Don't expect them necessarily. If they can, they will, but don't expect them to be there to protect you. You are responsible for your own safety.
I don't think a lot of people realize that for all the courageousness and heroics that we see and expect in our first responders, they do have a right to go home at the end of the day as well. They do have a right to survive.
Primary objective. Yeah.
Right.
I mean, that's their primary objective. They want to get home. So they're going to do what's necessary to get home. And that's why you have shootings like maybe this shooting, if it was justified or not, because in the officer's mind, his life was at risk, and he had to get home at the end of the shift. And so that's the reality. The reality is that they're not going to. Well, I shouldn't say they aren't, because I know guys that will. They run into burning buildings. They run towards the sound of gunfire, as they say, and that's all good and fine. But don't expect it. That's my point. It might be there, but what did Ronald Reagan say? The 7 most dangerous words in the English language are "We're from the government and we're here to help." The government is there to maintain itself. It's not there to protect you. And places, agencies like FEMA and other Homeland Security and so forth, their job is to maintain the peace. Their job is to keep things from getting out of control. It's not to see that I have gas for my generator.
There is nothing more, more apropos or obvious to that point than what has happened in Parkland, Florida, and the resource officer taking cover. And again, this judge coming out yesterday and saying that he had the right to do that. He had the right. Now, we might consider it, not courageous in the least, but he did have the right, legally speaking, to do that. And that's a perfect example of exactly what we're talking about. He put his own safety first. And again, a lot of guys that would have gone in. I think you would have gone in. I think I would have gone in. But at the end of the day, he didn't go in. And these kids were sitting ducks. And then, he creates an even worse situation by putting the school on lockdown so the kids can't even leave. And so this is, again, another example of them not being prepared and help not coming on the way.
That's right. And high schools are tough. The high school where my kids went, they're all gone from high school now. I graduated, but they allowed teachers to carry. And when I went in for a meeting with the vice principal or something like that, I could carry my weapon. I could carry my gun into that school. Guess what? Nobody's worried about there being an active shooter at that school. Nobody's worried about it because the teachers are armed. A lot of the parents that are visiting the school are armed. It's a safe environment as a result of that. Well, that's a political issue and probably not one that's that important. The point. Go ahead. I was just going to say.
Well, I was just going to say, it doesn't matter if it's political or not, because the point is still valid. And I just think we really need to drill down on the fact that people need to be aware how important it is for them to take responsibility for their own safety, their own security, whether it happens to be, at a mall or when they're out getting gasoline, or even in the case of, a high school. And so if people don't understand that to them, then, because the first responders can only get there when they can get there. And all across this country, you've got people that have lost their lives waiting on these people to arrive. And it's something as simple as being mentally aware. And I love the fact that you point out the mental awareness, because the last thing I want is somebody carrying a gun, for example, that really doesn't want to carry a gun, but they feel like they strap something to their hip, that all of a sudden there's safety, but the safety comes after the training. So all these points are so remarkably valid and important. I think people really need to appreciate them.
Well, I appreciate that. I'm happy with the curriculum we have. I like what I teach, and I've gotten a lot of feedback from people that it has saved their lives, has been incredibly useful. So, I think it's a good set of skills to learn.
Well, I'm actually looking at my calendar right now, and I definitely want to do the situational awareness, situational security stuff proper, and talk about baselines and things like that. And perhaps we can do that the second or third Friday in January if you're available. I'll drop you an email a little bit later today and give you a couple of options, because that's fascinating stuff to me, because I think there's too much gullibility in the world, and I don't want to paint the world as being dangerous, but darn it, the world's dangerous, and I think people need to realize that, it can happen at a flash point, at any point, anytime, anywhere, and for absolutely no apparent reason. And if people don't understand that, Kevin, they put themselves and their families in jeopardy.
That's right. There's a
Kevin,
couple of books that I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, please. No. We got a couple minutes.
Couple of books. One of them, there's two books that I'd say has affected me in terms of preparation for disasters are The Black Swan and Anti-Fragile, both by Nicholas Taleb, an economist of all things. But Black Swan events are the events that nobody sees coming. They're very unlikely but highly impactful, and great books. And Anti-Fragility is about how people respond to emergencies or to black swan events, essentially, and how there are people who are completely unprepared and they die. There are people who are resilient and they bounce back, and then there are people that are anti-fragile who seem to figure out a way to prosper in those black swan events, to come out of it ahead, not necessarily economically, but in every other way.
Right.
So those are just phenomenally impactful books that I've read in the last couple of years. I'll recommend those to anybody who's interested in these topics.
Well, they need to be interested because, again, I don't do this program to scare the living bahoo out of people. But, folks, we've seen it happen entirely too frequently. And, again, here in the Deep South, we're in Tornado Alley. We've seen it happen here. We can have an ice storm that pretty much shuts us down. And throughout the community, we're seeing one thing after the other take place that people are not prepared for, that they're ill-prepared for them. The thing with this shooting here in Birmingham is that we had a gun fired, and a cop comes in and sees a young man with a weapon and downs this young man, kills him, and turns out he wasn't the shooter. But simultaneously, we have learned that there was multiple people concealed carrying in this mall. This is on Black Friday, by the way, or Thursday night anyway, leading into Black Friday. All of a sudden, this cop's engaged with multiple people in this mall that legally were able to carry with their weapons drawn. That's a recipe for disaster. And so, we don't know what kind of training any of these people have. So, again, back to your original point, the training, because if we don't get it out of our heads that law enforcement are woefully outnumbered and woefully overworked and stressed out, then, we have a perfect environment for these chaotic and, this anarchy societies.
Sure. Yep. And the more you're trained, the more you know, the less you need. I don't know who I probably heard that. I probably heard that on. I'm going to say it was like one of the reality TV shows. The more you need, the less you know. I mean, the more you know, the less you need. But it's really true of training. The better trained you are, the less you have to worry.
Oh, you're exactly right. Kevin, good stuff. We're definitely going to do the situational security. Matter of fact, when I come back after the new year on this particular broadcast, I'd like for you to be the very first one that I speak to. So I'll send you a couple of alternative dates because I think that's fascinating stuff. But with that said, tell the listeners how they can find more about OnPoint Tactical and the variety of classes that you offer. It's a great website. It's an overwhelming amount of information on that website and things that people need to be aware of. So how can they learn more about Kevin Reeve and OnPoint?
Well, our website is onpointtactical.com. Between now and the end of the year, we have a discounted, if you purchase a class between now and the end of the year, you get it for $100 off. They're usually about they're $7.95 a class. It's a 3-day class. And then right now, through the end of the year, it's $6.95. And you can contact me at info@onpointtactical.com and or through the website. And onpointtactical.com is the website. And we'd love to see if we can help some people get a little bit better prepared to face the challenges that are ahead of them.
Well, I strongly encourage people to check it out and get all the information they possibly can because, this is not a clarion call for disaster right around the corner, but the reality of it is disaster is always right around the corner, and it can come in a variety of different forms. And the people are not, they've gotten a start today just being aware that there's threats out there. Hopefully they'll take the next step and build upon it. Well,
we can help with that. So,
I know I know you can, because it's obvious you have a wealth of information. Anybody that can talk for an hour and a half or so on just situational awareness and baseline security or baseline, environments, obviously knows their stuff. And again, your resume is extensively long. I could take me almost the entire broadcast just to read all the people you've trained over the years. And so it's obvious that you know your stuff. Kevin, thank you so much. I'll get in touch with you the next couple of days. We'll plan the next one of these, and we'll take it as long as you want to go with it when we talk about situational security and situational awareness. So I appreciate you popping by today. And again, it's info at OnPointTactical.com or OnPointTactical.com for the website, correct?
Correct. Thank you very much for having me on the show.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you, Kevin, and we'll talk to you very, very, very soon.
Okay. Sounds good.
All right. Bye-bye. All right, guys, going to wrap this puppy up. We have got a lot of things that we are planning for the coming weeks. This is going to be the last live broadcast until after the holidays are over. So you guys make plans to join us again this upcoming Monday when we do, and then there's that, on the Heart of America Talk Radio Network. So you guys have a great Christmas, and we will be back with you then. You've been listening to The Heart of America presents the Situational Security Program, Urban Threat Survival with Kevin Reeve. Y'all have a wonderful Christmas, and we will definitely be talking to you very soon.